"Dad, that kid looks just like me." Dad turned around and froze, not knowing he had twins. Before we dive in, I'd love to know where you're watching from, so drop your country in the comments below. Now, let's dive into this story of unexpected discovery and family reunion. Michael Ellison was the kind of man who excelled at everything he set his mind to. At 42, he was the CEO of Horizon Technologies, a rising star in the sustainable energy sector. His office overlooked the Seattle skyline, a testament to his climb from middle management to the executive suite in just under a decade. The Glass Award on his desk celebrated his recent recognition as one of the 40 under 40 business leaders transforming the Pacific Northwest. But of all his accomplishments, none compared to his son Jamie. At 6 years old, Jamie was an energetic, curious boy with his father's dark curls and his mother's green eyes. Since the death of Michael's wife, Caroline, 3 years ago from an aggressive form of cancer, father and son had formed an unbreakable bond. Michael had rearranged his entire life around Jamie, delegating more at work, setting boundaries on his hours, and making sure that despite the loss of his mother, Jamie would never feel the absence of family. "Dad, can we go to the new playground at Willow Creek Park?" Jamie asked one sunny Saturday morning as they finished breakfast. "Tyler from school said they have this awesome pirate ship structure." Michael smiled at his son's enthusiasm. "Sure, buddy. Let me just answer a couple of emails and we'll head out." "You promised no work on Saturday mornings," Jamie reminded him, his small face suddenly serious. Michael's heart tightened. His son was right, rules were rules. "You're absolutely right. Work can wait. Let me grab our jackets and we'll set sail for that pirate ship." 30 minutes later, they pulled into the parking lot of Willow Creek Park. The playground was bustling with children climbing, swinging, and racing around the elaborate wooden structures. Jamie's eyes widened at the sight of the massive pirate ship playground, complete with slides for plank walking, rope ladders, and a crow's nest lookout tower. "This is way cooler than Tyler said," Jamie exclaimed, already unbuckling his seatbelt. Michael laughed. "Hold on, Captain. Let me park properly first." As they walked toward the playground, Michael couldn't help but feel a surge of gratitude. These were the moments that mattered, the simple joy of watching his son run toward adventure, his whole being lit up with excitement. Caroline would have loved this, he thought with a familiar pang. She had always said that Jamie's laugh was like sunshine breaking through clouds. "Dad, can I go on the ship? Please?" Jamie was practically bouncing with anticipation. "Go for it, buddy. I'll watch from over here," Michael said, pointing to a nearby bench with a good view of the playground. "Stay where I can see you, okay?" Jamie nodded vigorously before dashing off toward the wooden ship. Michael settled on the bench, taking in the beautiful spring day. Cherry blossoms dotted the park, and the Seattle skyline peeked through the trees in the distance. He watched as Jamie climbed the rope ladder to the upper deck of the ship, joining a cluster of children already engaged in imaginative play. Michael pulled out his phone to snap a few pictures of Jamie at play. Caroline had always been the family photographer, and since her passing, he'd made a conscious effort to document these everyday moments. He was lining up a perfect shot of Jamie at the ship's wheel when his son's voice rang out. "Dad, Dad, come here. Quick." There was no fear in Jamie's voice, just urgent excitement. Michael pocketed his phone and made his way to the ship's structure. "What's up, buddy?" he called, approaching the base of the play structure. Jamie's head appeared over the railing, his eyes wide with wonder. "Dad, that kid looks just like me." Michael chuckled. Children often thought they'd found their doppelgangers. "Where, Jamie?" "Over there. By the swings." "Look, Dad, look." Michael turned in the direction Jamie was pointing. At first he didn't see anything unusual, just a row of swings with several children. Then his eyes landed on a boy pushing himself higher and higher, his dark curls catching the sunlight. Michael's heart skipped a beat. Then another. The world seemed to slow around him as he stared at the child on the swing. The boy had the same unruly dark hair as Jamie, the same nose, the same chin. Even from this distance, Michael could see the boy's green eyes, Caroline's eyes. As the child pumped his legs to swing higher, his laugh carried across the playground, a laugh Michael would recognize anywhere. It was Jamie's laugh. But Jamie was still on the ship structure, watching his father's reaction. Michael stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what his eyes were telling him. This had to be a coincidence, a strange trick of genetics that had produced a child who looked remarkably like his son. These things happened, didn't they? But as the boy jumped off the swing at its highest point, landing with the same fearless confidence Jamie always showed, Michael felt a cold realization wash over him. This wasn't just resemblance. This was identity. Dad. Jamie's voice broke through his shock. Can I go say hi to him? Michael couldn't find his voice for a moment. Then, why yes, buddy. Let's both go say hello. Jamie scrambled down from the ship and took his father's hand. Michael was grateful for the contact. He felt oddly untethered, as if he might float away from reality if not anchored by his son's small fingers. As they approached the swings, the other boy had moved on to the sandbox nearby. He was building an elaborate castle with focused determination, his tongue poking out slightly at the corner of his mouth, exactly the way Jamie looked when concentrating. Hi. Jamie said brightly as they reached the sandbox. I'm Jamie. You look like me. The boy looked up and his eyes widened in surprise. He stood up slowly, brushing sand from his knees. Whoa, the boy said softly. We look the same. Michael couldn't breathe. Standing side by side, the two boys were indistinguishable except for their clothes. Jamie wore a blue dinosaur t-shirt and khaki shorts. The other boy was dressed in a red and white striped shirt and denim overalls. I'm Ethan, the boy said, studying Jamie with the same fascination Jamie was showing him. Are you 6'2"? Jamie asked excitedly. Ethan nodded. I just had my birthday last month. April 14th. April 14th, Jamie's birthday. Michael felt his knees go weak. This couldn't be happening. Caroline had given birth to one child, their son Jamie. There had been no mention of twins, no indication that they had another child out there somewhere. That's my birthday too. Jamie exclaimed, turning to his father with amazement. Dad, we have the same birthday. Who are you talking to, Ethan? A woman's voice called out. Michael looked up to see a woman approaching from the direction of the park benches. She was slender with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, wearing jeans and a light jacket. As she drew closer, her pace slowed and her eyes locked onto Jamie, then darted to Michael. Oh my God, she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. Michael found his voice at last. Excuse me, ma'am. I'm Michael Ellison and this is my son Jamie. The woman's face had drained of color. Catherine Porter, she said automatically as if on autopilot. And this is Ethan. Are you Ethan's mom? Jamie asked innocently. Catherine hesitated before answering. I'm his aunt actually. I've raised him since he was a baby. Michael's mind was racing. Miss Porter, I don't mean to be forward, but the resemblance between our boys is remarkable. They even share the same birthday. Catherine's eyes never left the two boys, who were now comparing their hands, pressing their palms together to see if they were exactly the same size. Perhaps we could talk somewhere? Michael suggested, gesturing toward a quieter area of the park. Catherine nodded slowly. Ethan, why don't you and Jamie play in the sandbox for a bit? Stay where I can see you, okay? Okay, Aunt Katie, Ethan replied, already turning back to his sandcastle. Jamie, want to help me build the towers? As the boys settled into their play, Michael and Catherine walked a short distance away, finding a spot where they could still keep an eye on the children while speaking privately. I think we both know what we're looking at, Michael said quietly, his heart pounding. But I don't understand how this is possible. My wife, Caroline, gave birth to Jamie 6 years ago. There was never any mention of twins. Catherine's hands were trembling slightly as she tucked them into her jacket pockets. Mr. Ellison. Michael, please. Michael, she corrected herself. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound incredible, and frankly, until 10 minutes ago, I wouldn't have believed it myself. She took a deep breath before continuing. 6 years ago, my sister Lisa worked as a nurse at Seattle Memorial Hospital. She was assigned to the maternity ward. One night, she called me in a complete panic. She said she'd made a terrible mistake and needed my help. Michael listened, a sense of dread building in his stomach. Lisa told me that a woman had given birth to identical twin boys that day, but there had been complications after delivery. The mother was rushed into emergency surgery while the babies were taken to the nursery. Catherine's voice dropped even lower. Lisa was working a double shift that day. She was exhausted and she made a mistake in the records. Only one baby was logged under the mother's name. Michael felt as if the ground beneath him had disappeared. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Catherine nodded, her eyes filling with tears. My sister panicked. She was already on probation for a previous medication error. She was certain she'd lose her nursing license and possibly face criminal charges. She called me hysterical, saying she'd taken the second baby, the one not in the system, and needed me to keep him for a few days until she figured out what to do. Michael's shock was turning to anger. So your sister stole my son? Our son? It wasn't supposed to be permanent, Catherine said quickly, though her voice was heavy with guilt. But then I saw on the news that the mother, your wife I assume, had suffered severe hemorrhaging and was in critical condition. Lisa was terrified of coming forward at that point. Michael remembered those dark days all too well, the fear that he might lose Caroline, the sleepless nights at the hospital, the overwhelming joy and terror of being a new father while his wife fought for her life. Caroline survived, Michael said tersely. She recovered fully. I know, Catherine replied. And Lisa intended to find a way to return Ethan. But then, she was killed in a car accident just 2 months later. Michael's anger deflated slightly at this unexpected turn. I'm sorry for your loss, he said automatically. After Lisa died, I was Ethan's only family. I didn't know what to do. I had this beautiful baby boy who needed me, and coming forward seemed impossible. How could I explain that my sister had stolen a child and I'd been complicit? I told myself that the family, your family, had moved on with your one healthy son. That disrupting everyone's lives after so much trauma would only cause more pain. Michael ran a hand over his face, trying to process everything he was hearing. So you raised him as your nephew? Catherine nodded. I love him as if he were my own. I never married, never had children of my own. Ethan became my whole world. Her voice broke slightly. I know what we did was unforgivable. But please believe that Ethan has been loved and cared for every day of his life. Michael looked back at the sandbox, where Jamie and Ethan were chatting animatedly as they built their castle together. 6 years. He had missed 6 years of his son's life. A son he hadn't even known existed. Does Ethan know he's adopted? Michael asked. Yes, Catherine answered. He knows that his mother, who he thinks was my sister, died when he was a baby and that I've raised him since. But he doesn't know the circumstances. Michael's mind was spinning with implications. Legal ramifications. Custody questions. The emotional impact on both boys. On all of them. I don't know what happens next, Michael admitted, his voice strained. But I know I'm not walking away from my son again, even if I didn't know I was doing it the first time. Catherine's face crumpled slightly, but she nodded. I understand. I've always feared this day would come somehow. I just never imagined it would be like this, at a playground by complete chance. If you've been living in another city or even across town? Michael couldn't finish the thought. The randomness of their meeting today was staggering. If he had said no to Jamie's request to visit this specific park, if they had come an hour earlier or later, if Ethan and Catherine had chosen to go somewhere else today. Mr. Ellison, Michael, Catherine said carefully. What are you going to do now? It was the million-dollar question. Michael looked back at the boys, who had moved from the sandbox to the grass nearby and appeared to be racing each other to a nearby tree. Legally, I have every right to take my son home with me today and press charges against you for your role in his abduction, Michael said, watching Catherine flinch at his words. But that would traumatize both boys beyond measure. And whatever your sister did, whatever choice you made in not coming forward, Ethan clearly loves you. You're the only parent he's ever known. Michael took a deep breath. I need time to think. And we need to handle this delicately for the sake of both children. But make no mistake, I will be a part of Ethan's life going forward, and I fully intend to establish my legal rights as his father. Catherine nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and dread. I understand. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry. Not for loving and raising Ethan, I could never regret a single day with him, but for the circumstances. For the choices my sister made, and for my own cowardice in not finding a way to make things right. They exchanged contact information, both agreeing not to tell the boys the full truth just yet. As they called the children back, Michael felt a strange mix of emotions: rage at the deception that had cost him years with his son, amazement at discovering Ethan's existence, and a bizarre form of gratitude that Catherine had, at the very least, given his unknown son a loving home. Boys, it's time to go, Catherine called. Both children groaned in unison, their identical expressions of disappointment almost comical under different circumstances. Can Jamie come to our house sometime? Ethan asked eagerly. We found out we both love Legos and dinosaurs and swimming. Catherine glanced at Michael, her expression uncertain. Well, that's something Mr. Ellison and I will need to discuss. Actually, Michael said, making a split-second decision, I was thinking maybe we could all go get some ice cream together right now. If that's okay with Miss Porter? Catherine looked surprised but nodded. I think that would be nice. Yes. Both boys cheered, high-fiving each other with the easy camaraderie of children who had known each other their whole lives, rather than for barely 30 minutes. As they walked toward the parking lot, Michael watched the two identical boys skipping ahead, already finishing each other's sentences. Caroline would have been astounded by this development. She would have known exactly what to do, how to navigate these treacherous emotional waters. "We'll meet you at Scoop Dreams on Pike Street?" he confirmed with Catherine, who nodded. "We'll be there," she promised, her voice steady despite the anxiety visible in her eyes. As Michael helped Jamie into his car seat, his son was bubbling with excitement. "Dad, Ethan has the same favorite dinosaur as me. And the same favorite color. And he can do a cartwheel too. Do you think we could be brothers?" Michael's breath caught in his throat. Out of the mouths of babes. "What makes you think that, buddy?" Jamie shrugged. "We look exactly the same. And we have the same birthday. Tommy at school has a brother who looks a lot like him because they're brothers. So maybe Ethan is my brother?" Michael started the car, his mind racing. "Let's talk about that later, okay? Right now, let's focus on ice cream." But as he drove toward the ice cream parlor, Michael couldn't stop thinking about the road ahead. How would he tell Jamie the truth? How would he establish his rights to Ethan without traumatizing the boy? What kind of custody arrangement could possibly work in this unprecedented situation? And underneath all these practical questions lay a deeper emotional current. He had another son. A child of his and Caroline's who had been living just miles away, unknown to him. A piece of Caroline still walking the earth, carrying her smile, her green eyes. Michael glanced in the rearview mirror at Jamie, who was happily humming to himself, and thought of Ethan, who was probably doing the exact same thing in Catherine's car. Two identical boys with identical DNA but different lives, different experiences, different memories. Until today when their paths had finally crossed. One chance encounter at a playground had just changed everything. And Michael knew with absolute certainty that nothing would ever be the same again. At Scoop Dreams ice cream parlor, Michael watched as Jamie and Ethan sat side by side at a small round table, identical green eyes widening as the server brought over their massive sundaes. They had ordered the exact same thing, chocolate ice cream with hot fudge, extra whipped cream and rainbow sprinkles. No nuts. The coincidence was both eerie and heartwarming. "This is my favorite ice cream place," Ethan told Jamie, scooping up a large spoonful. "Mine too," Jamie exclaimed. "Dad brings me here after my piano lessons." Michael's eyes met Catherine's across the table. Her expression was guarded, but he could see the same wonder he felt reflected in her gaze. "Do you play piano too?" Jamie asked Ethan. Ethan shook his head. "No, but I take drum lessons. Aunt Katie says I'm really good but sometimes too loud." Catherine smiled fondly. The neighbors would agree with that assessment. "Jamie's actually about to start drum lessons," Michael said, surprising himself with how normal his voice sounded despite the turmoil inside. His piano teacher suggested it might help with his rhythm. "I could show you some stuff I learned," Ethan offered enthusiastically. "That would be cool," Jamie replied. As the boys chatted, Michael leaned slightly toward Catherine. "We need to talk more. Privately. Would you be free to meet tomorrow? Without the boys?" Catherine nodded. "I can ask my neighbor Mrs. Chin to watch Ethan for a couple of hours. She often does when I have appointments." They agreed to meet at a coffee shop the following afternoon. Michael knew he should probably contact his lawyer first, but somehow that felt too adversarial for what was already an emotionally charged situation. Better to have a calm, rational discussion with Catherine before involving legal professionals. After ice cream, saying goodbye proved difficult. The boys, having bonded instantly over their identical tastes and surprising number of shared interests, were reluctant to part. "Can Ethan come to our house tomorrow?" Jamie asked Michael as they prepared to leave. Michael hesitated. "Not tomorrow, buddy. But soon, I promise." He exchanged a glance with Catherine. Very soon. That night, after putting Jamie to bed, Michael sat alone in his home office, staring at a photograph of Caroline. It had been taken on their honeymoon in Greece, her auburn hair illuminated by the Mediterranean sun, her smile radiating happiness. "We had 2 sons, he whispered to the photograph. "Twins. Can you believe it? And I never knew." Tears filled his eyes. "You never knew. You should be here for this, Care. You should see them together. They're amazing." The next day, Michael arrived at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, his mind still reeling from yesterday's discovery. He had barely slept, staying up late researching the legal implications of their situation and trying to imagine all possible paths forward. Catherine arrived precisely on time, looking as exhausted as Michael felt. After ordering their coffees, they settled at a corner table far from other patrons. "I haven't told Ethan anything yet," Catherine began. "I wasn't sure what to say." "I haven't told Jamie either," Michael admitted. Though he's already convinced they're brothers somehow. Catherine smiled weakly. Children's intuition. Michael took a deep breath. I've been thinking about this situation from every angle. Legally speaking, I could pursue criminal charges against you for your role in concealing Ethan's identity. I could file for full custody immediately. But. Catherine prompted, her knuckles white around her coffee cup. But that approach would traumatize both boys, particularly Ethan. He knows you as his mother figure. Taking him away from the only home he's ever known would be cruel, regardless of the circumstances that brought him there. Catherine's shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you for seeing that. I've been terrified of losing him since the moment I saw you at the park. I'm not saying there won't be legal steps, Michael clarified. There will need to be. But I'm proposing we work together on a transition plan that prioritizes the boy's emotional well-being. What are you suggesting exactly? First, legal acknowledgement of my paternity. DNA tests to confirm what we already know, then formal recognition of my rights as Ethan's father. Second, a gradual introduction of the truth to both boys, age-appropriate, of course. They already suspect they're brothers. We can build on that. Michael paused to gauge Catherine's reaction before continuing. Third, a custody arrangement that allows Ethan to maintain his relationship with you while building one with me and his brother. Perhaps we start with weekend visits, then longer stays. Eventually, we could explore a more balanced arrangement. Catherine was silent for a long moment. You're being far more reasonable than I expected. Than I deserve, perhaps. Don't misunderstand me, Michael said, his voice hardening slightly. I'm still angry about the years I've lost with my son. I'm devastated that Caroline died never knowing we had twins. But punishing you won't undo that, and it certainly won't help either of the boys. Catherine nodded, her eyes downcast. For what it's worth, I did try to find information about you and your wife after Lisa died. All I knew was that the mother had suffered complications after delivering at Seattle Memorial on that date. I searched news archives hoping to find something, but there was nothing specific enough to lead me to you. Why not simply contact the hospital? Ask about twin births on that date. Catherine sighed. Fear. By then, months had passed. I was terrified of the consequences. For me, for Lisa's memory, but most of all for Ethan. I told myself he was better off with me than being thrown into the foster system while everything got sorted out. She met Michael's gaze directly. I know it was wrong. I've lived with that knowledge every day for 6 years. Michael understood the complexity of the situation, even as part of him wanted to rage against the injustice of it all. We can't change the past. But we can try to do right by both boys moving forward. After their meeting, they agreed on next steps. DNA testing later that week, followed by a consultation with a family attorney Michael knew. They would arrange a playdate for the boys over the weekend, beginning the process of integrating their lives. 3 days later, Michael's longtime friend and personal attorney Rafael Moreno sat across from him in his office, reviewing the preliminary DNA results. It's a match, obviously, Rafael said, setting down the report. 99.9999% probability that you're Ethan's biological father, identical probability that the boys are identical twins. Legally speaking, we're in unprecedented territory here, Michael. How so? Michael asked, though he had spent hours researching similar cases and suspected he knew the answer. Baby switching cases typically involve hospitals mixing up infants who go home with the wrong families. Both families are innocent parties. Here we have an intentional removal of a child followed by 6 years of concealment. Raphael leaned forward. Catherine Porter could face serious criminal charges, accessory to kidnapping at minimum. Michael nodded. But pursuing those charges would tear Ethan away from the only parent he's ever known. I can't do that to my son Rafe. Raphael studied his friend carefully. You've always been compassionate, Michael. It's one of your best qualities. But are you certain this approach is best? Ms. Porter participated in concealing your child from you for 6 years. After her sister stole him, Michael clarified. Catherine made poor choices, yes. Unforgivable ones, perhaps. But she also loved and raised my son when I couldn't. That counts for something. Their conversation was interrupted by Michael's assistant, Diane Wilson, knocking on the door. Diane had been Michael's right hand at Horizon Technologies for 5 years, managing his professional and sometimes personal life with efficiency and discretion. Sorry to interrupt, Diane said, but your 1 o'clock appointment is here. Michael checked his watch. Send them in, please. And Diane, could you clear my schedule for the rest of the afternoon? Family matters have come up. Diane raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course. Anything else you need? Actually, yes. I'll be restructuring my work schedule over the coming weeks. Can you set up a meeting with the executive team for Monday morning? I need to inform them of some changes. After Diane left, Raphael gathered his papers. I'll draft the legal documents we discussed. Just remember, Michael, proceed carefully. The courts will ultimately prioritize the children's well-being, but establishing your paternal rights while allowing Catherine to maintain a role in Ethan's life will require delicate navigation. The following Saturday, Catherine brought Ethan to Michael's home for their first official family playdate. Michael had spent the morning nervously preparing, making sure Jamie's toys were organized for sharing and stocking the refrigerator with snacks he hoped Ethan would enjoy. "Nice house," Catherine commented as Michael welcomed them inside. Her tone was appreciative but not envious, though the contrast between Michael's spacious lakeside home and Catherine's modest apartment, which Michael had visited briefly when picking up Ethan's DNA sample, was stark. "Thanks," Michael said. "It was Caroline's dream home. We bought it when she got pregnant, planning to fill it with children." The irony of that statement wasn't lost on either of them. Jamie came tearing around the corner when he heard voices. "Ethan, come see my room. I set up a racetrack." The boys disappeared upstairs, their identical sneakers thundering on the steps. "Would you like some coffee?" Michael offered Catherine, who still stood somewhat awkwardly in the entryway. "Please," she accepted, following him to the kitchen. As Michael prepared their drinks, he noticed Catherine studying a photograph on the refrigerator, Caroline holding newborn Jamie in the hospital. "She was beautiful," Catherine said softly. "Yes, she was," Michael agreed, handing Catherine her coffee. "Brilliant too. She was an environmental scientist. We met at a conference where I was speaking about green energy initiatives." Catherine smiled. "Ethan has an unusual interest in science for a 6-year-old. Now I know where it comes from." They settled into a surprisingly comfortable conversation, sharing stories about the boys' early years. Catherine pulled out her phone to show Michael photos of Ethan's first steps, first day of preschool and 5th birthday party. Michael found himself both grateful for these glimpses into his son's life and aching for all he had missed. The playdate was a resounding success, with Jamie and Ethan discovering even more shared interests and habits. They both slept with their socks on but removed them immediately upon waking. They both arranged their food so different items didn't touch on their plates. They both had an inexplicable fear of automatic hand dryers in public restrooms. "It's incredible," Catherine marveled as they watched the boys building an elaborate Lego structure. Nature versus nurture playing out right before our eyes. "Caroline would have found it fascinating," Michael said. "She was always interested in twin studies." The mention of Caroline brought Michael back to a question that had been troubling him. "Catherine, I've been wondering, did Ethan ever have health issues? Specifically, has he been tested for the BRCA1 gene mutation?" Catherine looked surprised. "No, why would he be?" Michael's heart sank. Caroline's cancer was linked to a BRCA1 mutation. It's hereditary and the boys have a 50% chance of carrying it. Jamie was tested at age 4, he's negative, thankfully. But Ethan should be tested too. Catherine's face paled. "I had no idea. Of course we'll get him tested right away." This moment of shared parental concern seemed to shift something in their dynamic. A reminder that regardless of the past, they both wanted what was best for Ethan. Over the next few weeks, Michael and Catherine established a routine. Ethan would spend Saturdays at Michael's house, giving the twins time together while allowing Michael to build his relationship with his newly discovered son. They had told the boys a simplified version of the truth, that a hospital mix-up had separated them at birth, and now they had found each other again. "So we're really brothers?" Jamie had asked, his eyes wide. "Not just brothers, identical twins," Michael had explained. "You grew from the same egg in mommy's tummy, so you have the exact same DNA." "What's DNA?" Ethan had asked. "It's like instructions that make you who you are," Catherine had jumped in. "It's why you both have the same color eyes and hair. And why we both hate broccoli," Jamie had added triumphantly. The boys had accepted this explanation with the remarkable adaptability of children. If anything, they were thrilled by the discovery, instantly embracing their twin status and the special bond it represented. The adults found the transition more challenging. Catherine struggled with the impending changes to her life with Ethan, while Michael grappled with establishing boundaries and expectations in this unprecedented family structure. Support came from an unexpected source. Michael's mother, Eleanor Ellison, who flew in from Chicago when Michael finally shared the incredible news. "Twins?" Eleanor had exclaimed over video chat. "My word, Michael. I need to see this for myself." Eleanor's arrival added a new dimension to their evolving family dynamic. At 70, she was a force of nature, a retired family court judge with a no-nonsense demeanor but a deeply compassionate heart. "Catherine," Eleanor said when they were first introduced at Michael's home, "I understand you've been raising my grandson for 6 years without knowing his true identity." Catherine nodded nervously. "Yes, ma'am." Eleanor studied her carefully. "And by all accounts you've done an excellent job. He's bright, polite, and happy. That speaks volumes." The tension in Catherine's shoulders visibly eased. Eleanor had a way of cutting through awkwardness with direct acknowledgement. "Now," Eleanor continued, turning to both Ethan and Jamie, who were watching her curiously, "which one of you wants to show your grandmother what you can do on the piano? Michael tells me you're both taking lessons now." With Eleanor's help, they began establishing traditions that included all of them. Sunday dinners became a weekly ritual, with Catherine and Ethan joining Michael, Jamie, and Eleanor at Michael's home. Eleanor taught both boys how to make her famous apple pie, while Catherine shared her talent for storytelling, captivating everyone with elaborate tales she created on the spot. Michael found himself increasingly impressed by Catherine's devotion to Ethan and her willingness to embrace this new family arrangement despite the threat it posed to her relationship with the boy she had raised as her own. He also noticed how she never tried to compete with him or undermine his developing relationship with Ethan, a generosity of spirit he hadn't initially expected. At work, Michael had restructured his schedule to allow more time with both boys. He delegated more responsibilities to his capable executive team and instituted a strict home-by-6 policy for himself. Diane, his assistant, had been an invaluable ally in this transition, fiercely protecting his new boundaries and rearranging his calendar to prioritize family commitments. "Mr. Reynolds from the Singapore office wants to know if you're available for a dinner meeting next Thursday," Diane informed him one afternoon. "Thursday is piano recital night," Michael replied without hesitation. "Both boys are performing. Schedule him for Friday lunch instead." Diane smiled. "Already did. Just testing you." The legal aspects of their situation proceeded slowly but steadily. With Raphael's guidance, Michael had established his paternity rights, while Catherine retained legal guardianship of Ethan with Michael's consent. They were working toward a formal co-parenting arrangement that would recognize both their roles in Ethan's life. 4 months after that fateful day at the playground, they faced their first major challenge when Catherine received a job offer in Portland, 3 hours away from Seattle. "It's an amazing opportunity," Catherine explained during a private conversation with Michael. "Senior librarian position, better pay, benefits. I've been on the waiting list for this kind of opening for years." Michael felt a cold knot in his stomach. "But it would mean taking Ethan away from Jamie. From me. After we've only just found each other." Catherine sighed. "I know. That's why I wanted to discuss it with you before making any decisions. I'm torn, Michael. This job would provide more financial security for us, but I don't want to separate the boys again." They sat in tense silence, both aware of the competing priorities at stake. Finally, Michael spoke. "What if you didn't have to choose?" "What do you mean?" "Horizon has a satellite office in Portland. I could split my time between locations, keep an apartment there. The boys could attend the same school, live primarily with you in Portland but stay with me every other weekend and holidays. I could fly up frequently midweek." Catherine looked surprised. "You would do that? Rearrange your entire life?" Michael met her gaze steadily. "Catherine, I missed 6 years with my son. I'm not missing any more. And I won't be the reason those boys are separated again." "That's an incredibly generous solution," Catherine said, her voice thick with emotion. "But what about Jamie? Would he move to Portland too? We'd split time. When Ethan is with me, Jamie would be too. When I'm in Seattle, Jamie would be with me there. It's not ideal, but it's a compromise that keeps the boys connected while respecting your career opportunity." They spent hours discussing logistics, both committed to finding a solution that worked for everyone. By the time they finished talking, they had outlined a plan that, while complicated, prioritized the twins' relationship and honored both adults' roles in raising them. That weekend, they gathered both boys to explain the potential changes. To their surprise, Jamie and Ethan embraced the idea enthusiastically. "So we'll go to the same school?" Ethan asked excitedly. "And have 2 houses?" Jamie added. "One in Portland and one here?" "Something like that," Michael confirmed. "We're still working out the details." "Cool," both boys exclaimed in unison, then dissolved into giggles at their synchronized response. Later that evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Michael found Catherine standing on his back deck, looking out at the lake. "Penny, for your thoughts," he said, joining her at the railing. Catherine smiled. I was just thinking about how differently this all could have gone. If you had been a different kind of man, less understanding, more vengeful, this could have been a disaster for everyone, especially the boys. I've had my moments of anger, Michael admitted. There are still days when I think about everything I missed and feel rage bubbling up. But then I look at Ethan, how confident and kind he is, and I know that's because of you, Catherine. You didn't just keep him alive, you helped him thrive. Catherine turned to face him. I've been meaning to give you something, she said, pulling an envelope from her pocket. I've kept a journal since Ethan was a baby. Important milestones, funny stories, challenges. I thought you might want copies of these entries, to fill in some of the gaps. Michael accepted the envelope, unexpectedly moved by the gesture. Thank you. That means a lot. There's something else, Catherine continued. Lisa, my sister, left a letter with her personal effects. It was addressed to me to be opened in case of her death. In it, she confessed everything and included the names of the parents she had taken Ethan from, Michael and Caroline Ellison. She begged me to return him if anything happened to her. Michael stared at her, stunned. You knew our names? All this time? Catherine's eyes filled with tears. Yes, and it's the most shameful part of my story. I found the letter 3 days after her funeral. By then, Ethan was almost 3 months old. I had already fallen completely in love with him. I told myself I would reach out, arrange some kind of shared custody perhaps. But then weeks passed and months, and the longer I waited, the harder it became to imagine giving him up or admitting what I'd done. Why are you telling me this now? Michael asked, his voice tight. Because secrets have already cost this family too much, Catherine replied simply. And because I want you to understand that I'm committed to honesty moving forward, no matter how difficult. Michael nodded slowly, processing this revelation. Part of him wanted to lash out at this final deception, but he recognized the courage it took for Catherine to confess. We all make choices we regret, he said finally. What matters is what we do next. 2 years later, their unconventional family had found its rhythm. The Portland arrangement had worked better than anyone expected. Michael had purchased a comfortable home there, just 10 minutes from Catherine's apartment. The boys attended the same school, participated in the same activities, and spent weekends together regardless of which parent they were staying with. Michael had restructured his work life significantly, promoting Diane to COO and reducing his own role to focus more on family. Eleanor had relocated to Portland as well, unable to bear being separated from her grandsons. She had purchased a small cottage near Michael's Portland home and had become an essential part of their support system. On a warm summer evening, they all gathered in Michael's backyard for the twins' 8th birthday celebration. Jamie and Ethan, even more identical now if that were possible, were showing their grandmother how they could do perfect synchronized cartwheels across the lawn. They've been practicing for weeks, Catherine told Michael as they set up the picnic table for dinner. They're determined to try out for the gymnastics team this fall. Michael smiled, watching his son's antics. They're amazing kids. We're lucky. Diane, who had become a friend as well as a colleague, arrived with an elaborate birthday cake decorated with the boys' favorite video game characters. Sorry I'm late, she apologized. Board meeting ran long. How's the company surviving without me there every day? Michael teased. Thriving actually, Diane replied with a grin. Though we miss your inspirational speeches. Raphael arrived shortly after, bearing twin gift bags. Where are the birthday boys? I brought something they've been asking for. Uncle Rafe, the twins shouted, abandoning their gymnastics demonstration to race toward him. Michael observed the scene with a full heart. His sons healthy and happy, surrounded by people who loved them. Catherine caught his eye across the yard and smiled, a smile of shared understanding. Their journey had been unconventional, marked by loss and deception but ultimately redeemed by forgiveness and the daily choice to put the children first. As they gathered around the table for dinner, Michael stood to make a toast. 8 years ago today, 2 perfect babies came into this world. Through an unusual series of events they took different paths for a while. But fate, or perhaps something more intentional than fate, brought them back together. He looked at the assembled faces, his mother, his sons, Catherine, Raphael, Diane, this family that had been formed not by traditional bonds but by choice and circumstance and love. To Jamie and Ethan, he continued, raising his glass. May you always know how many people love you and may you always have each other. To Jamie and Ethan, everyone echoed. Later, as the party wound down and the twins disappeared upstairs with their new gifts, Catherine joined Michael on the porch swing. Caroline would be proud, she said softly. Of the boys of course but also of you, How you've handled all of this. Michael nodded, his throat tight with emotion. I think about that a lot. What she would make of our strange little family. Not so strange, Catherine replied. Just bigger and more loving than anyone expected. As the sun set over their Portland neighborhood, Michael reflected on the journey that had brought them here. One chance encounter at a playground had changed everything, revealing not just a hidden sun but also illuminating the extraordinary capacity of the human heart to expand beyond expected boundaries. Family, he had learned, was not defined solely by DNA or legal documents, though both had their place. It was defined by daily choices to care, to forgive, to prioritize love over resentment, possibility over pain. It was messy and imperfect and constantly evolving just as they all were. And watching his identical sons, one he had raised from birth, one he was still getting to know, Michael knew he wouldn't have it any other way. As the evening light faded, the twins returned to the yard, launching into an elaborate game they had invented, a mixture of tag and make-believe that only they fully understood. Their laughter echoed across the garden, a reminder of resilience and joy and all the unexpected gifts that life sometimes brings. Thank you for watching today's story about Michael, Jamie, and Ethan. Life sometimes brings unexpected challenges, but also miraculous reunions and second chances. This story reminds us that family isn't just about biology, it's about the choices we make every day to love, forgive, and put others first. Sometimes the most beautiful families are created through unusual circumstances, and healing can happen even after great loss or deception. The greatest gift these twins received wasn't finding each other, though that was miraculous, but being surrounded by adults who were willing to set aside their own pride and pain to create something beautiful for the next generation. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming family stories. Drop a comment below to share your thoughts on Michael and Catherine's journey, and how they created a new kind of family that worked for everyone. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. Until next time, remember that sometimes life's greatest plot twists lead to our most beautiful chapters. Thanks for watching.